Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you especially to the people who help make this possible for you with their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. Alright, we're going to be talking about the Acolyte and what we learned as a result of Choice, which was episode 7 in particular, to what it tells us about the Jedi Order at this period of time in the galaxy, and whether we should have been as hard on them as we were starting to be. I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about a little bit more and more is that when you really look closely at the Jedi Order and how they operate, it does really feel kind of sketchy. I mean, the original trilogy version of the Jedi was as golden a picture of anything as you could possibly imagine, but it also didn't really show us how the Jedi Order actually worked. So we were able to hold this idealized version of the Order in our heads, and the prequel trilogy really kind of debunked that notion to some degree. At least in terms of showing the Jedi Order as an institution, and a flawed one at that over time could be corrupted, especially if a certain Sith Lord was being super patient about it. And the Clone Wars series and other storytelling in the era really helped to build upon those ideas. And as we know from interviews with the creators and cast of The Acolyte, the series is meant to show us the Jedi not only at the height of their power, but also to show things starting to tumble down the other side. Now that we're 7 episodes into the season, we are kind of getting that, but we're getting it from a different perspective necessarily than we might have thought. In particular, we're getting that from Vernestra Rwoh and all of her interactions, not just with Saul, but also with friendly senators and the things that she's saying to various Jedi. All the things about managing the fallout from May's murderous spree and how it's being perceived. The fact that there are senators who are not happy with the Jedi, that there are political enemies lurking about. But I think you could make the case convincingly that the problems the Jedi Order is experiencing in this season playing out, it's not necessarily because of the Jedi Order as an institution, it's because of the actions of one person, Jedi Master Saul. Now, maybe you could lay some of this at the feet of Padawan Torben because of how sulky he was being on the one hand, but then also he was possessed by Mother Anastasia, which had to have been a traumatic experience. And certainly when they found out about the result of the twins, blood test, then yeah, his freak out is a result of everything that he was thinking and feeling, and he needed to get his business under control. And as a side note, by the way, I guess Leslie Headland did an interview recently where she said that the Virgins on Brendok is not Osha and May. It's something else entirely that they're just leaving open-ended to potentially investigate and discover in later storytelling, not even necessarily the Acolyte. But yeah, Torben lost it, so you could lay part of the blame at his feet, but you could then also lay part of the blame at Master Indara's feet, because Torben was her Padawan. She maybe should have had a little better leash on him, so to speak. Maybe should have put him on the sidelines once he had had that experience with Mother Anastasia, but yeah, that didn't happen. And she tried to shut Saul down by saying, nope, the Jedi Council said no, and that's that. And Saul went rogue on her. So yeah, ultimately I don't want to blame Indara for this, and I do think that she made the best decision possible in a bad situation by deciding to cover everything up at the end, especially in the context of who the Jedi Order are and were at that period of time and what they were doing in their recruitment of Jedi. The fact that they basically destroyed Osha's entire community, and if they had told the truth, then Osha probably would have been cast out and not had a chance to join the Jedi Order, and that was really the only opportunity she had left. And so it was kind of a moral thing to cover that up in some way. Yeah, it's not, perfect candor or anything like that, but again, seems like it was the best decision in a bad situation, especially in the context of the Jedi Order and what they're all about. And Kelnacca, pretty much blameless as far as I can tell in this whole thing. The poor Wookiee was possessed and just in the wrong place with the wrong group of Jedi at the wrong time, and then got killed by a Sith for his trouble 16 years later. So that leaves us with Jedi Master Saul. And what we see of him and what we hear about him in those Brendok scenes from 16 years ago is that there was something about him that wasn't ready for a Padawan. It's basically suggested that he was not at a place where he had the emotional maturity to take on a Padawan. But clearly there was some deep loneliness, some deep hole in his soul where he felt like he needed to have some kind of Padawan. And whatever ended up happening with Osha and May, suddenly he glommed onto that in a really strong fashion, practically bordering on the obsessive, I would say, and ultimately was able to save Osha and take her as his Padawan. But as we find out over the present day time period of the series, he has a problem with attachment. We don't necessarily know all of the circumstances of Osha's departure from the Jedi Order 6 years prior to the present day events of the series. But we know it wasn't a smooth situation, even though Osha says, nah, I left voluntarily. But we find out that Master Indara was recommending that she get gone. We know that Master Saul is walking around with a little hollow portrait of Osha. He very much had a strong fatherly instinct and attachment to Osha, and that emotional attachment is still there. Jecki catches Saul looking at Osha's hologram at some point and calls him on it, and he has a beautiful response about it, but still the fact remains he seems to have a very deep attachment that he is not letting go of. Vernestra senses it as well, and she's letting Saul pursue this against her better judgment. And then the loss of Jecki, killed right in front of him by Chimere, that only made things worse for Saul, made him more emotionally unstable to the point where he nearly kills Chimere in anger. Chimere is actually pretty happy about this. He's like, yeah, I'm stoking up his anger and hatred and stuff, and that's what I want to do as a Sith. Of course, Osha called him out and shamed him on what he was about to do and reined him in at the last minute, so Saul's journey to the dark side was interrupted. Now, prior to that, he was starting to get to the point where he was just going to come clean. Had he struck down Chimere, maybe that wouldn't have happened after all. But Osha calling him out and keeping him from doing it seems to have put him back on the path of thinking that, yes, I can't tell this lie anymore. Too many people have been hurt by it, and too many people are getting hurt by it, and I've got to come clean now, or else it's only going to get worse. Now, if you wanted to try to drag the Jedi Order as a whole in and lay a little blame at their feet about this, then you could talk about the fact that the Jedi Order probably should have identified the fact that Saul was a little bit unstable emotional attachment-wise and should have done something about that. But yeah, in that sense, it's almost reflective of what they did with Anakin Skywalker, the fact that he was also emotionally like, yeah, and not only did they not really address that very well, but they also made him a general in a war when he was way too young to be doing that sort of thing on top of all the other issues he had. But this does make me want to learn a lot more about Saul's backstory, so I hope we get High Republic storytelling that explores his history and his time in the Jedi Order, his time with Osha in the Jedi Order. I think that all would be cool in those 10 years between Brendok and when Osha leaves the Order. But yeah, fingers crossed we'll get more storytelling from this particular part of the era. That's what I've got for you on our conversation about the Jedi Order and Saul, and maybe the blame to go around for what happens in the Acolyte isn't really all about the Jedi Order. It might be mostly about this one guy. And I'd love to hear what you think about that. So please, if you're catching this on YouTube, comments are right there. If you're on Spotify, then use the Q&A section there. And if you're anywhere else, please head to the blog post for this show's episode at sw7x7.com and let me know what you think. And that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please help me get it out to more people who might enjoy it. You can do that by just telling people in person or online or via algorithms. And you can even help me continue to produce this dose of Star Wars joy. And you can learn more about that at patreon.com/SW7x7. And it just remains for me to say, thank you so much for joining me for this episode as always, and may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.